almost too deep for me. Feel my brain getting real sore. Above the science guy. Above the science guy. Above the science guy. Above the science guy. I've shown our world is spinning round, and gravity's pulling us down. Let's curvature, 'cause Earth is round. No firmament to be found. Above the science guy. Above the science guy. Above the science guy. Above the science guy. Flat Earth is just a belief. There's no reason to be found. Dogma gives me no relief. The ignorance is profound. Above the science guy. Above the science guy. Above the science guy. Above the science guy. Definition, no education, just confrontation.
Well, guys, welcome. This is going to be our first official live stream. No more accidental hit the wrong button things, no more tests. Everything seems to be working great. How's the voice sound? Okay, voice is good. Now, I've got a couple of things that I'd like to do today. First of all, we have a hangout going, and since I don't really feel like getting porn bombed on my very first outing, I'm going to have a email address in the chat there. Send me a note, let me know who you are, and we'll see whether or not we can get you on the hangout with me. All right. The other thing that I wanted to do was go over a couple of videos by dmarble and then maybe discuss them a little bit. We can do that. Soothing like angels flatulence. Now that actually is an interesting term. I'm going to have to use that one again. But in any event, we're going to have a look at dmarble here and then maybe discuss it a little bit. We'll do it in the chat, and if you guys are in the hangout, we'll talk about it live. All right, guys, here we go.
And you go around long enough in the same direction, you wind up in the place you started from. Yes, Thomas. Why don't we fall off when we walk underneath, Miss Sarah? Because of a force called gravity. What does gravity look like? Gravity is something we can't see, but we know it's a great invisible force that keeps us all here on Earth. It's a natural force that keeps us all from flying off into space. We were always...
Alright, so I want to talk a little bit about that phrase. That phrase that we get so often. You know, if it weren't for gravity, we'd all go flying off into space. As ridiculous as that sounds, there are still adults, supposedly rational thinking adults, that still say that exact same thing. So the situation is that we've all been subjected to an extensive propaganda campaign that has resulted in people operating with total disregard for their own God-given senses. And this has led people to believe in ideologies that go completely against common sense and rational thought. When individuals express their knowledge that they live on a flat, stationary plane, one of the most popular responses we get is in the form of gravity. And gravity is used to explain away everything that makes absolutely no sense in relation to your day-to-day experience. It's the glue that holds this whole thing together. So we were all programmed to believe in gravity, and we're told to respond by explaining gravity and saying that gravity is this amazing force on Earth that pulls everything towards the center of mass from all directions. This infers that when people say that believe in a globe, that there exist people thousands of miles beneath your feet who are walking, driving, riding bikes, flying airplanes, finding love and loss, experiencing tragedy and hope, all while living their entire existence upside down relative to their position. And when people say that, I don't believe that they're really thinking that deeply about what they're saying. And what you're seeing here is a visual demonstration of just that. I know it looks silly, but we globe skeptics or flat earthers, we're not the ones that believe that this nonsense actually matches up with reality, just because that's what we're told. But if you believe that gravity is strong enough to be pulling everything towards the center of mass, and let's go ahead and take a look at this example and break it down a little bit. A person can be standing next to a 4,000-pound vehicle and step outside said vehicle and stand next to a helium balloon while that balloon is attempting to float upward to the sky that is relatively beneath someone else's feet. Because people believe that's a thing. You can dig through the earth and then come out the other side, and there's going to be sky up there when you get out on the other side. People believe that gravity is strong enough to hold this 4,000-pound van to the ground, because that's what you're seeing right here. The gravitational pull is supposedly holding the van on the concrete, keeping it from flying off into space, right? Somebody can step out of that same vehicle with absolutely no detection of this tremendous force that's holding the van to the ground, and as ridiculous as this sounds and looks, that's exactly what most of the Earth's population has been trained to believe. And then you're going to have these so-called experts on the internet who would shrug that off and offer up word salad, pseudo-scientific jargon, word trickery to confuse people, using terms like selective gravity to explain away these things that have no relation to reality. Now let's address this logical fallacy of gravity is what's keeping us all from flying off into space, and add a little question in there. Now, those of us who actually trust in our senses to interpret reality and have grown a skepticism for the globe model, and we find it easier to conclude that gravity is a non-existent force, and that we all, meaning everyone existing on Earth, all of us, we experience life on a flat, motionless plane. we all walk around upright at a 90-degree angle on this vast flat plane, just like we all experience every day of our lives. Our day-to-day experience is us living on a flat, motionless plane. None of us have ever seen anybody upside down. That makes absolutely no sense. Anyway, but if gravity is the force that is keeping us all from flying off into space, then this would mean that there's some force, some repellent force that's either pushing everything away from the surface of the Earth, or that there's some force that's external to the Earth that's pulling everything away from the surface of the Earth in all directions, relatively. This would mean that there's some force that gravity's constantly in this eternal struggle with. Well, as far as we know, there's no repulsive force pushing everything away from the Earth. In fact, we've been taught that the Earth has a magnetic core, although it's been demonstrated that magnetic properties are lost when a metal reaches a certain temperature, but I suppose that's for another video. And as far as the external force pulling things off the Earth, that gravity's supposed to be constantly fighting against, well, some people would say that's the vacuum of space, and, you know, attribute all that to, you know, this infinite vacuum of space. But it's been demonstrated, and it's been discussed at length by other content creators, that the idea of an enclosed system existing next to a vacuum without a physical membrane or a barrier between the two, that's a physical impossibility. So to summarize, if you believe that gravity is the force that keeps us all from flying off into space, then that means that there has to be some force that gravity is perpetually counteracting, that's either pushing us away from the surface of the Earth, or that's pulling us out into space, off of the face of the Earth. So the question is, what is that force that gravity is constantly battling against? What's the name of that force? I just want you to think about these things. And that's all I got for this video. As always, be good to each other, take care of yourself, stay flat. I'll see you next time. Thank you.
Well, I've got to say that that's really special. We're going to go ahead and unpack this thing a little bit. But before we do that, here's something I'd like to share with you guys. That's a G-force meter. It has to do with the accelerometer in every single iPhone and iPad. This one happens to be in an iPad. Now, there's a couple of things that you can see on this, and the similar equipment on Androids and such. And that is that this white line that's on top is the total amount of gravity or acceleration that the iPad is experiencing. And as you can see, it's about 1. That's acceleration of 9.8 meters per second squared. And it doesn't have a vector on that. It's just a total amount of acceleration. Now, the green line is in the y-axis, which is in the long axis of the phone, or the iPad in this case. Now, in this case, the iPad is sitting in its case, and it's propped up in an angle. So the long axis of the iPad is actually on my desk, which is pretty level, and as you see, it's reading about 0. Now, the blue line right underneath it, which is reading, looks like -4 or -0.43 gravity, that is the z-axis or the z-axis. That is the front to back axis of the iPad. And the fact that that's reading a little bit over -0.4 tells you that my iPad is not going straight up and down. It's actually angled a little bit, and there's a net vector of force going through it. But the main force is in the x-axis, which is the short axis of the phone. And it's in a negative direction because that force is going from the right to the left. This is an actual acceleration that is being measured by a chip in the phone. This is not density, it's not buoyancy, and it's what's responsible for the fact that when you move the iPad and flip it over, the screen changes. You see that? Now, let's go ahead and just to show that this is all in live, real time, we saw that the tracings kind of moved around a little bit. But let's go ahead and put the iPad directly on its back. Now, as you see, the blue line, which is the z-axis, is now having the brunt of gravity, and it's almost the full 1g of gravity that the iPad is experiencing. But you'll also notice that in the x-axis, there is a slight reading that's towards the negative. That's because the iPad is not level on my desk. The top of the iPad, if you look at it with the button on the right, is actually propped up a little bit on the case. But if I level it, watch what happens. And that's how these iPhone and iPad levels work. They measure the acceleration due to gravity. So, gravity is most definitely a real thing. But let's see what dmarble has to say about it. Let's go back and unpack his video a little bit. So we're going to shut this one here down, and we're going to go back to this one, and we're going to play it again for a sec. And then I'm going to make some comments as we go.
And you go around long enough in the same direction, you wind up in the place you started from. Yes, Thomas. Why don't we fall off when we walk underneath, Miss Sarah? Because of a force called gravity. What does gravity look like? Gravity is something we can't see, but we know it's a great invisible force that keeps us all here on Earth. It's a natural force that keeps us all from flying off into space. We were always...
Alright, so I want to talk a little bit about that phrase. That phrase that we get so often. You know, if it weren't for gravity, we'd all go flying off into space. As ridiculous as that sounds, there are still adults, supposedly rational thinking adults, that still say that exact same thing. So the situation is that we've all been subjected to an extensive propaganda campaign that has resulted in people operating with total disregard for their own God-given senses.
Hey guys, my God-given sense says that is gravity. All right. I happen to be an adult. I even went to school for a little while, I guess, to be an adult. I don't know. You know what really amazes me is that grown adults don't understand or accept the concept of gravity that they can measure with any iPhone that they own. I mean, honestly, what do they think causes objects to drop to the ground when you let go of them? You know, so let's let Marble here continue with his silliness, and we'll move on a little bit.
And this has led people to believe in ideologies that go completely against common sense and rational thought. When individuals express their knowledge that they live on a flat, stationary plane, one of the most popular responses we get is in the form of gravity. And gravity is used to explain away everything that makes absolutely no sense in relation to your day-to-day experience.
Well, that's not really how it works there, Marble. Gravity is a force of nature. It's one of the four primary forces in the universe. It is a thing. You know, I mean, we can measure it, we can observe its effects, and we can use it to predict things in the future. Everything from rocket launches to artillery shells to how far we can throw a shot put, or how we catch a baseball. You know, if you think about how we catch a baseball, if it weren't for our detailed understanding of gravity by the time we were about 10, we wouldn't know where the ball would drop. You know, it would come off the bat, and then we'd watch the arc for a little while, and we'd be absolutely clueless as to where to stand to catch the ball. You know, we have to understand these things, and we use gravity to predict those, even if we don't consciously think about it.
It's the glue that holds this whole thing together. So we were all programmed to believe in gravity, and we're told to respond by explaining gravity and saying that gravity is this amazing force on Earth that pulls everything towards the center of mass from all directions.
Yeah, that's pretty much what gravity is, and it's not something that we're told to use as a cover story of some sort. It's an observable effect that we're all intimately familiar with. And yeah, you like to talk about a flat Earth, which of course you have absolutely no evidence for. And then we present you with something like gravity that says a flat Earth is utterly impossible because any large object like that would naturally just collapse in on itself, and the most efficient shape for it would be a sphere. You know, how are you going to have a plate that is 8,000 miles in diameter without the edges just kind of collapsing in? So, you know, it's not our fault that we actually understand these things. Perhaps you should take a deeper look at yourself, Marble, and see why you don't.
This infers that when people say that believe in a globe, that there exist people thousands of miles beneath your feet who are walking, driving, riding bikes, flying airplanes, finding love and loss, experiencing tragedy and hope, all while living their entire existence upside down relative to their position. And when people say that, I don't believe that they're really thinking that deeply about what they're saying.
Well, as a poster boy for lack of deep thinking, I'm really not surprised that you don't understand this. Let's unpack that statement that you just made. Now, I've got friends that are down in Australia. We could talk Wolfie, we could talk Critical Think. There's a number of them down there. Now, relative to me, they are standing upside down. However, relative to them, I'm standing upside down. You understand that the Earth is a sphere. Down is towards the center of the Earth. It doesn't matter where you are on the Earth. Down is from your head towards your feet. It's the direction the pen falls when you let it go. So your cognitive problem here is that you are trying to take yourself off of planet Earth, out into space, in whatever direction you happen to be floating in. Towards your head would be up, towards your feet would be down. And then as you look over on the Earth, there are going to be people that are standing upright relative to your position. There are going to be people standing upside down relative to your position. However, relative to their positions, they're all standing with their feet on the ground. And that's just a concept that you can't seem to get through. And, you know, it kind of baffles me that a grown man can't understand that basic three-dimensional thinking that any 10-year-old trying to catch a baseball can do. So, we'll go on.
And what you're seeing here is a visual demonstration of just that. I know it looks silly, but we globe skeptics or flat earthers, we're not the ones that believe that this nonsense actually matches up with reality. Just because that's what we're...
Okay, now here's the difference. You know, I don't like the term globe believers. We don't believe in the globe. We observe the globe, okay? I don't think that people that are interested in flat Earth or that have this level of cognitive ability are truth seekers or anything like that. What they are is reality deniers. Because you can take D. Marble, put him up on the ISS, and make him stare out the window for 3 days at the spherical Earth below him, and bring him back to Earth. And he will claim that the entire thing was just CGI windows playing a show and he never left the planet. You know, no amount of proof will fight the narrative that they use to generate income from basically gullible people on the internet. So Speaking of generating income, super chats are open. I'm going to be doing these a lot in the future, and for some reason, I think I'm going to need an alcohol fund. So if you wish to donate to Bob the Science Guy's alcohol fund, now would be a great time to do a super chat. You know, $1 a piece for everybody that's out there. I could get a couple cases of beer. There's 128 of you. And right about now, I could use one. So let's go ahead and continue with D.
Oh. But if you believe that gravity's strong enough to be pulling everything towards the center of mass, and let's go ahead and take a look at this example and break it down a little bit. A person can be standing next to a 4,000-pound vehicle and step outside said vehicle and stand next to a helium balloon while that balloon is attempting to float upward to the sky that is relatively beneath someone else's feet. Because people believe that's a thing. You can dig through the earth and then come out the other side, and there's going to be sky up there when you get out on the other side. People believe that gravity's strong enough to hold this 4,000-pound van to the ground, because that's what you're seeing right here. The gravitational pull is supposedly holding the van on the concrete, keeping it from flying off into space, right? Somebody can step out of that same vehicle with absolutely no detection of this tremendous force that's holding the van to the ground, and as ridiculous as this sounds and looks, that's exactly what most of the Earth's population has been trained to believe. And then you're going to have these so-called experts on the internet who would shrug that off and offer up word salad, pseudo-scientific jargon, word trickery to confuse people using.
You know, the unfortunate thing is it's real easy to confuse flat earthers. Here, let me show you. Refraction, diffraction, perspective. Now they're all going nuts. Next, we'll do some math and make them cry.
Terms like selective gravity to explain away these things that have no relation to reality. Now let's address this logical fallacy of gravity's what's keeping us all from flying off into space, and add a little question in there. Now, those of us who actually trust in our senses to interpret reality and have grown a skepticism for the globe model, and we find it easier to conclude that gravity is a non-existent force, and that we all, meaning everyone existing on Earth, all of us, we experience life on a flat, motionless plane.
All right, guys, here's a test for you. What do you call a pilot that flies into a cloud and relies on his own personal experience to decide which way is up? Dun 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 dun. All right, the average lifespan of a pilot flying into a cloud that is not instrument rated and doesn't know how to use his instrument is about 160 seconds before they hit the ground and die. And the reason for that, and I've personally experienced this, is your head, your inner ear, can tell you up is that way. And your instruments tells you up is that way. That's the way is up. That way is up, and that's the way you go. Because if you think that's up, you're going to die. And this is something that D. Marble just does not have the mental capacity and the imagination and the ability to reason through. And this is why basically he's D. Marble.
We all walk around upright at a 90-degree angle on this vast flat plane, just like we all experience every day of our lives. Our day-to-day experience is us living on a flat, motionless plane. None of us have ever seen anybody upside down. That makes absolutely no sense. Anyway, but if gravity is the...
I see people upside down all the freaking time. Generally, you know, as a doctor, I'm kind of holding them by their ankles and shaking them so the money comes out of their pockets. But no, they are upside down. You have to be able to use that in your head, but they're not upside down to them. They're upside down relative to your position. And quite frankly, this little illustration that he is using right here is a classic example of his utter lack of understandings. I'm going to do a rumpus here. He's utterly confused about this.
Force that's keeping us all from flying off into space. Then this would mean that there's some force, some repellent force that's either pushing everything away from the surface of the Earth, or that there's some force that's external to the Earth that's pulling everything away from the surface of the Earth in all directions, relatively. This would mean that there's some force that gravity's constantly in this eternal struggle with.
No, gravity's really not in a constant eternal struggle. You sound like you're writing a Victorian romance novel. All right? There are things that can oppose gravity, but gravity's just gravity, dude. You know, it's just a thing.
Well, as far as we know, there's no repulsive force pushing everything away from the Earth. In fact, we've been taught that the Earth has a magnetic core. Although it's been demonstrated that magnetic properties are lost when a metal reaches a certain temperature, but I suppose that's for another video.
Yeah, I would really love to have you discuss that and how the magnetic core of the Earth is generated. But before you do that, you have to acknowledge that indeed there is a magnetic core of the Earth, because we can measure it with every compass on Earth. All right?
And as far as the external force pulling things off the Earth, that gravity's supposed to be constantly fighting against, well, some people would say that's the vacuum of space, and, you know, attribute all that to, you know, this infinite vacuum of space.
No, literally none of us attribute that to the infinite vacuum of space. Literally none of us. Now, on Earth, we do have an opposing force to gravity. Basically, gravity is what holds us on the ground. But as the Earth rotates, we have something called centrifugal force that is a fictitious force that operates in the opposite direction to gravity. Now, let's go ahead and do a little contest in the chat. How fast would the Earth have to rotate how many minutes or hours would the Earth have to rotate in order for the centrifugal force to balance the force of gravity? All right, and then we'll talk about that again in a minute.
But it's been demonstrated and it's been discussed at length by other content creators that the idea of an enclosed system existing next to a vacuum without a physical membrane or a barrier between the two, that's a physical impossibility.
No, it's actually not a physical impossibility. It follows the second law of thermodynamics very nicely. What is the second law of thermodynamics, Marble? And is the Earth an open system? Is it a closed system? Or is it an isolated system? And by the way, what's the difference between the two? Which ones can energy move across? How about matter? Does energy come into the Earth system? Does matter? Do you even know?
So to summarize, if you believe that gravity is the force that keeps us all from flying off into space, then that means that there has to be some force that gravity is perpetually counteracting, that's either pushing us away from the surface of the Earth or that's pulling us out into space, off of the face of the Earth. So the question is, what is that force that gravity is constantly battling against?
All right, Cajun, you win. In order for objects to be weightless at the equator, the Earth must rotate every 84 minutes. Now, the further you get away from the center of gravity of the Earth, the slower that orbit is, okay, or the longer that orbit would take. So for example, if you shrunk the entire mass of the Earth to the size of a basketball and put it right in the center of the Earth, If you orbited around that at 4,000 miles every 84 minutes, you would be in a stable orbit. If you went 250 miles higher, it would take you every 92 minutes. Now, the Earth's surface is about 4,000 feet from the center of gravity. So if the Earth rotated every 84 minutes, things on the equator would be weightless. Now, the Earth doesn't rotate every 84 minutes, it rotates every 24 hours, and as a result, gravity at the equator, or the pull of gravity at the equator, is reduced by this centrifugal force as the Earth rotates. And that centrifugal force is about 0.3% the strength of gravity. So it reduces the weights of objects by about 0.3% at the equator versus the poles. Now, because the ISS rotates or orbits about 250 miles above us, its rotational or orbital speed is about once every 92 minutes. Now, as you go further out, you get to a point where it would take a full 24 hours to orbit the Earth at that stable elevation, which is about 26,000 miles from the center of the Earth. And that is where we put geostationary satellites, and they just basically sit right over one spot on the Earth and orbit and rotate right with it. Now, as you go further out, you end up 238,000 miles away at the moon, and that orbit is once every 27.3 days. Go still further out and switch the orbital bodies, whereas you have the sun as the body being orbited and the Earth in orbit around it. At 94 million miles, that takes approximately 365 days. So, and using that, is Venus's year, because Venus is between us and the sun, is their year less than our year? Is Mars's year longer than our year? Yes and yes.
What's the name of that force?
It's called centrifugal force. And the formula is force C equals mass times velocity squared divided by the radius. Pretty cool stuff.
I want you to think about these things. And that's all I got for this video. As always, be good to each other, take care of yourself, stay flat. I'll see you next time. Thank you.
Okay, let's have a look.
Long enough in the same direction.
So let's go ahead and have a look at some of these chats. I'm trying to do too many things right now. Anonymous, it says here the moon's every 28 days. Well, it depends on how you look at it. The actual sidereal orbit of the moon is about 27.3 days. The orbit of the moon by phase is about every 28 days, or a little bit more. And the reason being is, if you look at the moon in position over a spot on the Earth, that's every 27.3 days. If you look at the moon by phase, what happens is as you're orbiting around the sun, the place that you had a full moon 1 month will be slightly different than where you'll have the full moon the next month. It's just a little bit longer. So that's how that works out. Let's go see what else we have up in here. Boy, we got a bunch of super chats. You guys are trying to make me an alcoholic. I love it. Thank you very much, guys. Let's go see what else we have. Okay, so we're going to go on up here and just look at some things that people wrote. Now make sure you, if you want me to really pick it out, make sure you do an @Bob the Science Guy, okay? Because that kind of does it. You know, that kind of brings it to my attention. You don't have to do a super chat if you don't want to. Just make sure you address it to me so that'll highlight it. No, actually, that would not be a black hole if the Earth was the size of a basketball. I think that, if the Earth was the size of maybe a BB or smaller, you'd start getting into that general range. But black holes are incredibly dense, and there's really not that much mass in the Earth. Did I say 4,000 feet or 4,000 miles? I meant 4,000 miles, guys. Yeah, 23 hours, 56 minutes. Yeah, something like that. What would I do if I found out one of my patients was a reality denier? Quite frankly, that's not what they come to me for. I'm not a psychiatrist, I'm an internist. And I do pain management, addiction, and medical marijuana. So it's not... The other thing, too, is that one of the things about being a doctor is I really need to have your trust. I need to know you're cheating on your wife, because then I need, there's certain things that I need to check to protect both of you, okay? It's not my place to judge you on your morality or your actions. If you're doing methamphetamine, you're going to get a talk from me. But I need to know that because it's going to have an effect on your blood pressure and your heart rhythm, and I just need to be aware of it, and you need to be comfortable enough to be able to tell me. I don't judge patients. That's just the way a good doctor should do it. Casual spaceman, yes, at the equator gravity, the acceleration due to gravity is about 0.97 what it is at the poles. That's about right. And if you look at there's a great video by Wolfie, and if there's a request, I'll go ahead and put that up. Wolfie does really great videos. The only problem I have with him is he takes 10 minutes to describe 3 minutes worth of information. But what he did was he took a very sensitive scale, one that is accurate down to a 1/100th of a gram. And then he took a 500-gram reference weight, and that was just a solid piece of metal. And then when he was in Perth, Australia, what he did was he calibrated that so the scale read 500 for that. Then he took it down to Canberra, which is 3 degrees further south from the equator, and it weighed a little bit more. And then he took it up to Broome, Australia, which is at 17 south. Perth is about 31, 32 south, and Canberra, I think, is about 35 south, or somewhere, in that general area. But Broome is about 17 degrees south, and really the weight of that object was about 44 100ths of a gram less at Broome, and it was about 16 100ths of a gram more at Canberra compared to Perth. So that's pretty much that's pretty much confirmation of rotation, because you're not going to have that variation in gravity, and that is directly due to the rotation of the Earth. It's one of the ways we measure it. Yep, the ISS kind of hauls butt. It's about 7.66 kilometers per second, and I'd say that'd be about right. Okay, let's get back up here. Hey, Ed, thank you very much for that super chant. I don't drink and fly, dude. Okay. Hey, Bob, could you narrate my life? You have a great, relaxing voice. Yeah, okay. I don't want to narrate my life, man. I hate telling horror stories. Oh, yeah, in Michigan they have to spray for hippos every spring and kangaroos every autumn. Yeah, we have a lot of interesting wildlife. It's not like Australia where everything that creeps or crawls will kill you. But, yeah, we have some interesting things. We got deer and bear up here. Yeah, up in Alaska, when I was up in Alaska, that was one of those things. You go camping, you need to go use the restroom. Yeah, here's the 44, take it with you. Chris Cardwell, Bob the Science Guy, sup? What's up with you? Why do we still have stupid people in 2019? That's from Sky. Well, one of the things that I'm hoping to do someday, maybe when I retire and have time to experiment in my laboratory, I'd like to make a drug that we could add to the water supply that made stupid hurt. because I think that if stupid was painful, people would want to do something about it. As it is right now, you can be stupid and quite happy with your life. We want to put a little bit of incentive in there to maybe get some education. You know, not everybody needs to get a PhD. I mean, seriously. You know, the only thing you really need to do is be good at what you choose to do in your life and enjoy doing it. You know, I'm a doctor. I went through a lot of school, but, you know, I started on the ambulances when I was 19 years old, and I'm 56 now. I've never worked a day in my life. Every day has been an opportunity to try and help people live a better life. And it's not work to me. It's a calling, and it's a pleasure. And I just love being at the service of other people like this. And if I can help them out a little bit, I try to. All right, so that was, let's see what else we have back here. Yeah, the Freemasons apparently went back in time to make Pythagoras a member of the order. Yep. Okay, Chewbird. Citarail, yes, it's Citarail, not side rail. I tend to be a little mealy-mouthed. I got yelled at for doing Raleigh versus Rayleigh criterion the other day. And my thought on that is tough. Figure it out. America. Yeah, basketball's way too big for a black hole. Like I said, that would probably have a lot more in it than just the Earth, man. Hey, Tim, don't worry about the super chat at all. Seriously. This is a hobby for me. If I can get enough money from advertising to let my wife have some milk and egg money, that's fine with me. You know, I'm just honored people give me anything. And it's a hobby. It's kind of like growing orchids. If you can sell a few around prom time and kind of pay for the year's worth of fertilizer and stuff, that works for me. Look, a buddy of mine gave me this really cool Blue Yeti mic. That's a $130 thing. I've got the software that I need to get my sound working now, and I figured out how to use OBS. You know, I'm learning stuff here. And someday, if this channel ever hits 100,000 or something, I've got a couple little plans for it. One of which is I think that we massively underpay teachers. And I've often thought about ways that maybe we could help the teachers out a little bit and let them earn a little extra money. And one of the things that I thought about doing on some of these bigger YouTube channels, wouldn't it be kind of cool to have a place that teachers could upload videos and we'd put them out to a 100,000 subscriber channel, and whatever advertising they got on it, they got to keep? That could be as much as the school district pays them if they, you know, put out a few good quality videos and people enjoy what they put out. How about just doing a PowerPoint presentation and a video of your absolute favorite class that you taught? Maybe there's something that you really reach out and touch the students with, and they really grasp it. You know, Mr. Weber, who was my earth science teacher when I was in high school, was a meteorologist with the Army Air Corps during World War II up in the Aleutians. And he instilled in me a love of weather. All right? He would talk about this stuff forever. If he put some of those things on video and gave a 15-minute talk on them, I think people would look at it and maybe click on an ad or two. There's nothing wrong with that. Crown Royal. Colin, you want me to get some Crown Royal? I've got to be honest with you, I really am not much of a drinker, but if I'm going to stay working on Flat Earth, I may take it up. So next time you see me, I may have a little thing of Crown Royal here for you. All right, Ed, thank you very much. No, and I would never consider drinking and driving. Or drinking and flying, that's it. Why can't I be your doctor, Wendy? Well, probably first of all because I'm in Michigan and you're not. The other thing is I'm kind of changing my practice around a little bit. used to do an awful lot of pain management and addiction, and I do medical marijuana. In Michigan here, they just legalized marijuana back in November. And even though it's a very bad idea, there's a lot of people that are trying their hand at recreational. So, you know, the medical marijuana certification business is down a little bit. But I'm thinking about getting back into addiction. And to be honest with you, I kind of miss managing high blood pressure and diabetes and things like that. Those are things that were challenging intellectually to me. You know, right now, basically, oh, got glaucoma? Here you go. You know, that's kind of a no-brainer. They really don't need a doctor to do that, but the law requires one. But I'd really rather kind of get back into solving the puzzles of internal medicine. Yep, I'm a medical marijuana doctor here in Michigan. Yes, that is correct, Daniel. The Earth's rotation would have to be 17 times faster than it is right now in order for objects on the equator to be weightless. Okay, now Chris Puncher, what if they denied your advice because you come from a place of authority? Well, considering I'm the one that has the authority to actually say yes or no on something, well, that's fine. You know, I mean, they don't have to have it. Nobody's ever died from not getting a medical marijuana certification. And the cool thing about things that really matter is, you know, if you're sitting there clutching your chest, sweating like a pig, pale as a ghost, and I suggest that you go to the hospital and you refuse, that's not a real good decision on your part. But look on the bright side. You're going to be unconscious in a few minutes, and then I still get to call an ambulance. Did I do Suboxone patient or treatments? Yes, I did. I'm a big believer in Suboxone. I think it's a wonderful medicine when used properly. I've always viewed Suboxone as a medicine you go on to get off of. And first you get them under control, and then you wean them down rapidly. Somebody with a real bad narcotic addiction may take up to a year, but every time that they come into your office, it's an opportunity to see if you can reduce the dose a little bit. And if you do it like that, that's really a good thing. All right, what do we got? My thoughts on CBD. Great stuff. It doesn't give you the giggles. I kind of like that. Can I do a video on Jake the Asshole? Well, I don't know Jake the Asshole, but he sounds intriguing. So let me have a look. Forever Learning. Hi, Bob. Glad to catch you live at last. Well, you missed it the other day because I accidentally hit the wrong button as I was making a video. And basically, you saw me I accidentally, instead of hitting stop record, I hit start stream. So basically, it just merrily broadcasted everything that was going on in my office the other night and saw me working around just doing stuff. It was basically Bob the Science Guy in his natural habitat, not, you know, being observed and unknowing. Felt like I had peeping Toms when I said, oh crap, that's broadcasting. I look up and there's 50 people watching me. That's kind of fun. How many we got now? 166. Man, that's a lot. Okay, let's go see if we can... Vesta, good balanced answer to my question. Thank you. Well, I try and do good balanced answers. Thoughts on CBD? We did that one. Jake the Asshole, we talked about him. Have I seen Red Rhetoric's latest project? Which project is that? Why can't they explain why places that are closer to the magical equator are hotter and have a higher population of people with dark skins than places more north and south? Reasons. See what else we got here. I'm fairly new. Elon Musk. I'm fairly new to your channel, but I'm enjoying it. Great. Send me a super chat. I was going to give you the creepy Nathan Oakley. waiting for the chat to start, but I just couldn't bring myself to do it. What else we got here? Stupid people would have to be stupid to connect their stupidity with pain, though. Would be too stupid to connect their stupidity with pain, though. That's a good point, Chris. We'd probably have to have a marker or, you know, drop leaflets from a plane or something. Do you see a parallel? This is a good question here from Robert Thomas. Do you see a parallel between flat earthers and persons with addictions? Denial. No, I don't. People with addictions generally have a stressor in their life. They have something that they're having trouble dealing with and they're self-medicating it. Being the guy that just hates his job, hates his boss, and, you know, his wife is critical of him, that just basically says, I got to stop by the bar and have 6 or 8 drinks before I can go home and deal with this crap. Then you have people that like the feeling they get from prescription medicines. It gives them an escape. The theme for substance abuse to me many times is escape from an unpleasant situation. The theme with flat earth is distrust of authority. They don't believe people that have education. They don't believe the government. They don't believe NASA. They don't believe anything that they cannot personally experience themselves. Now, whether or not they believe in bacteria, because you need equipment to see them, and whether or not they want to go to court and explain to the judge how the officer used radar, and that's not an actual direct measurement. They used math to calculate that they were speeding. I don't know how well that would work out, but that's the type of mentality that you see in flat earth. You see that in a number of other conspiracy theories as well. The overwhelming trend is one of distrust of authority. And, I don't know what's causing it. Yep, stupidity is not right. See what else we have down here. Paul S. Yeah, you would cause a new drug addiction crisis. Yeah, my stupidity drug. Yeah, that maybe. Yeah, NASA did indeed. It's a little known fact, but I did see a YouTube video about this. NASA did indeed go back in time to install the equipment to do a hologram. They put it at the South Pole, by the way. That's why you can't go there. But there is holographic equipment at the South Pole that projects the moon out, and it's been doing it since some of the earliest art that depicts the moon. So at least back to Roman times. Paul S. NASA pays me? Yeah. Yes, I am a minion of Satan, but my duties are largely ceremonial. And, NASA, Wolfie and I are both NASA shills. Because we're pilots and, we're paid to do this. I get a little more than Wolfie does because I do the flight physicals for the astronauts. Chris Puncher, that's a great idea. Oh, cool. The existence of delicate orchids prove that the biblical floods never happened. I don't know about that. I don't know where the connection would be. Now, if you look at the straits, the Phosphorus Straits going in, I think it's to the Black Sea, is it, by the site of Old Troy, there looks like there was some sort of a dam or bridge there that blocked the water off, that broke, and then you had a huge waterfall there that filled that basin. And there are communities that are under the water out there. That may have been the origin of the biblical flood story, but it's a pretty common story, and it's a great metaphor in many religions. So I'm not a particularly religious person. So, I'm by no means a Bible scholar or a Koran scholar or anything like that. But, I'm one of these guys that they kind of say is read. I'm kind of widely read, but I've heard of it. Brilliant thinking. Need people like Bob in charge. Yeah, okay. Well, next time the reptilian overlord of the world comes up for a vote, write my name in. Oh, have I considered a series of videos debunking Brian Muller's balls out physics nonsense videos? I'm not familiar with them. Brian Mueller? Mullen? Let me write that down. I'll tell you what, I'll go ahead and write that down. Let me look into it another time here. Tommy, yeah, you don't drink beer, but sometimes you feel like you need one. After the last few days of debate, it's getting to be a challenge for you. Yeah, I know the feeling, trust me. New name, you disagreed with the legalization here in Michigan. I'm kind of curious as to why. Drop me a note. The orchids can never survive immersion in water. Yeah, over-the-counter codeine cough syrup. Used to be able to buy it, but it was behind the counter and you had to present a driver's license for it. It was kind of like, one of those things if you want to buy some freaking Sudafed, you need to leave a blood sample for it. Couldn't do music without drugs. Yeah, okay. I wouldn't say that's a good way of doing it, but germ theory is just a theory. That's right. Pseudomonas does not exist. Either does gonorrhea. Okay, Chris Puncher, it's 5 p.m. No, it's 6 p.m. Bob, did you say that you can't see anything smaller than 0.07 degrees in angular size? No, I did not. There's a thing out there called the Rayleigh criteria, or Rayleigh criteria. And what that does is that has to do with the ability to see two objects and detect that they are two separate objects. So if you have two lit objects that are a certain distance apart, between your eye and each of those objects, you can form an angle, okay? Now, as that angle gets smaller, there reaches a point which is based on the aperture that you're looking at them through, in my case, the pupil, and the wavelength of light, which may be, say, 500 nanometers. So if you're looking through a 5 millimeter pupil at 500 nanometer light, the Rayleigh criteria says that the critical angle that you can't tell one point of light from the other is going to be 0.007%. It's about 25 arc minutes. Now, surprisingly, your eyes are only sensitive enough to tell objects apart that are 60 arc minutes apart, or 1 minute of angle. Now, on your eye chart, your Snellen eye chart, which is considered the vision that is considered 20/20 here in the United States and 6/6 in Europe, where they use meters. Those little letters that you're looking at the 20/20 line are 5 arc minutes high. So 1/5 of that is the limit of our ability to discern two separate sources. And if you cut that in half, or 1/10 the size of those, you're starting to get into the Rayleigh criterion limit of diffraction and the limit of discernment. What else we got up here? Okay. You guys ready for the next one? Let's go see what we have here. I'm going to go ahead and shut up here for a minute. And we're going to have a look at this video.
In the discussion between flat versus globe, we often come across the explanation of gravity. Gravity is the glue, in my opinion, that holds this whole heliocentric model together. But another question that I'd like to ask about gravity concerns gravity and our moon. Now, the way that we're taught that gravity works here on Earth is that everything's being attracted to the center of the mass of the Earth. That's what causes people to walk upside down on the underside of a spinning ball, and that's what causes these trillions of gallons of water to be able to conform to the outward exterior of this spinning ball Earth that we all supposedly live on. Anyway, my question is, it kind of comes in two parts. The way that gravity works here on Earth seems to be different than the way that gravity works out in space. The way that it works on Earth is the whole, like I said, mass attracts mass. Everything's affected by the Earth's gravitational pull. Therefore, everything is being held down to the surface. Okay, fine. With the exception of bugs, smoke, clouds, helium balloons, hot air balloons, things like that. But I digress. Now, out in space, the way that gravity works, it just causes objects to orbit around other things. See, in the heliocentric model of our solar system, all the planets are orbiting around the sun. Okay? Now, the Earth is said to be orbiting around the sun, also, although we see video of what is obviously the sun making a circuit around the face of the Earth. But, moving along, let's play Globey here. If you're a globe believer and you go with that model, you prescribe to the idea of gravity as it's been taught, then you also believe that the Earth is orbiting around the sun as well as all the other planets. Now, there are 5 planets that are beyond the Earth that are still orbiting around the sun due to the idea of being within the sun's gravitational pull. Those planets are Mars, Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, and Neptune. Now, according to the globe model, Jupiter is the largest planet in the solar system. It has a 272,967 mile circumference, and it's also large enough to hold 1,321 Earths inside it. Now, Neptune is the planet that's farthest away from the sun in our solar system. It's said to be 2.793 billion miles away from the sun. Now, I would have to ask the question, if the largest planet in our solar system, Jupiter, is subjected to the gravitational pull of the sun, if the planet that is farthest away from the sun, Neptune, is subjected to the gravitational pull of the sun and caused to orbit around it, why is it that our moon, which is hilariously smaller than Jupiter and way closer to the sun than Neptune, why is our moon not orbiting around the sun? What we understand in the flat earth community, the sun and the moon are what moves here. They make a clockwise circuit around the center, which is known as the North Pole. I even took a trip to Alaska last summer so I could get a time lapse of the sun doing just that. The sun starts at this orange pole, moves off around the mountains, comes back around this little hill, comes back through the sky, and there it is back at the orange pole. So, if we have 5 planets that are much larger and much further away from the sun than our moon, why is it that the moon doesn't orbit around the sun? As always, be good to each other, take care of yourself, and stay flat. I'll see you next time. Thank you.
This could be that.
Well, let's see now. I got a couple of things on here that kind of bothered me a little bit. RapidX, I don't believe I ever blocked you. As a matter of fact, I think you've had some really good comments on my site. If you're blocked, it was clearly accidental. I'll double check it and make sure that you're not on that list, but we'll get it fixed up for you. Kerboides, you say it's a free download? You don't happen to have a link for that, do you? Oh crap, I turned blue again, didn't I? This doggone thing, the white balance on it, on OBS, just kind of goes haywire once in a while. It's weird. And Mastermind says I blocked clearly. No, I haven't. Rabbit X, there you go. Hey, thanks for the super chat. No, but I really never blocked you. I actually kind of like your comments. I recognize your name. I've seen them before. No, I didn't pop out to make a cup of tea. I'm sitting right here looking at these chats to make sure that I'm not missing anybody's comments. Let's see what else we got up here. Rabbit X, oh man, I actually had to stop and write your name down so that I could double check and everything and not touch out you're pulling my leg. You owe me another super chat. Yep, monochromatic light source does look blue to you. That's because I'm under blue monochromatic light. Actually, they say that this has something to do with the reflection off the screen, and sometimes it does that. The other thing I found is if I brought my hand up, now I'm not blue anymore. Now I'm blue. That's kind of freaky, isn't it? Okay, I'll have a look. Now, let's go ahead and have a look at this idiocy from D Marble again, and we're gonna have a look and see if we can unpack it a little bit.
In the discussion between flat versus globe, we often come across the explanation of gravity. Gravity is the glue, in my opinion, that holds this whole heliocentric model together. But another question that I'd like to ask about gravity concerns gravity and our moon. Now, the way that we're taught that gravity works here on Earth is that everything's being attracted to the center of the mass of the Earth. That's
very good. Well done. Now notice that every one of those arrows is pointing down. Down, D Marble. Down. Okay? So the people that are down in South Africa, their down is different than the people on the North Pole, but they're both still down. Okay?
what causes people to walk upside down on the underside of a spinning ball, and that's what causes these trillions of gallons of water to be able to conform to the outward exterior of this spinning ball Earth that we all supposedly live on. Anyway, my question is, it kind of comes in two parts. The way that gravity works here on Earth seems to be different than the way that gravity works out in space.
That would be a nope. Works the same, dude.
That it works on Earth is the whole, like I said, mass attracts mass. Everything's affected by the Earth's gravitational pull. Therefore, everything is being held down to the surface. Okay.
On Earth, that would be right. I think, by George, you're getting it.
Okay, fine. With the exception of bugs, smoke, clouds, helium balloons, hot.
Bug smoke, clouds, helium balloons. You think maybe there might be an explanation for some of these things? Let's see, bugs. What happens to dead bugs? If you were to hold out a dead bug and let it go, what would happen to it? I think it would kind of fall to the ground, wouldn't it? Because gravity says it should. But if you put energy into a live bug, which ultimately, of course, comes from sunlight, that energy is transferred to the body and the muscles of the bug, and it flaps its little wings, it can overcome gravity. But that's because they're very light and they're putting energy into it. Now, what happens if you get a butterfly's wings wet? Can it fly? Nope. So that's that. Why would smoke rise, D Marble? Now, in the flat earth world, everything's buoyancy and density, right? I mean, you guys seem to be the experts on buoyancy and density, or at least to listen to you, you are. So, is smoke warmer or cooler than the air around it? Is warm air more or less dense than cold air? Do you think maybe there might be a reason the smoke, which is warm air, is rising up above cooler air? Like buoyancy? Kind of, you ever hear that? Kind of the same thing works for a helium balloon. Now, you realize, of course, that helium balloons don't go up. They're pushed up, okay? Because denser air has more mass to it than the helium does. And as a result, there is more mass to pull with gravity. That causes that mass to be pulled more strongly downward. Okay? That's why a feather and a lead brick both are affected by gravity and the same acceleration of gravity, but there is much less mass in the feather than there is in the lead brick. So if you let them both go, they'll both fall down. But the lead brick is the one that will dent your car. The feather won't. It's because there's more mass to it. So, you know, you can't really debunk a system if you don't understand the system in the first place. Did anybody ever tell you that, D-Marble? You have to be able to understand what you're trying to debunk. All right?
Air balloons, things like that. But I digress. Now, out in space, the way that gravity works, it just causes objects to orbit around other things. See, in the heliocentric model of our solar system, all the planets are orbiting around the sun.
No, it doesn't cause things to orbit around other things. That's not the only thing gravity does in outer space. Things actually fall and hit things in outer space. That's how we get meteors. That's how planets and asteroids collide and bounce off of each other. All right. Didn't you ever play like Asteroid when you were a kid? You know, all those little things coming together, and every now and then one asteroid would hit the other and they'd break apart into small asteroids. That's kind of a model of what really happens in the universe. So pay a little more attention to video games, man. That's what you really need to do, because you can learn a lot from video games. Because apparently, D-Marble, you have a lot to learn. Now, the reason that things go into orbit around other bodies, yes, it does relate to gravity, but it also has to do with the speed that they're moving over the bodies. All right? If I throw a baseball up into the air, it's not going to go into orbit. It's going to come back to Earth. However, if I shoot a rocket up into the air and I reach a speed of about 17,500 miles an hour, I'm going to achieve orbital speed to make it around the planet. If I go faster, I may even be able to break away from the gravity of the Earth. Now, we'll go ahead and let you continue on from here, but you're really not off to a very good start here, Marble.
Okay. Now, the Earth is said to be orbiting around the sun. Also, although we see video of what is obviously the sun making a circuit around the face of the Earth.
It may be obvious to you, but I think you'd be a little hard-pressed for me if I asked you to provide me with evidence that the Earth was moving, the sun was moving, or both was moving. I don't even think you'd know where to begin to determine what evidence for that would be. Now, let's go ahead and start off with, say, star trails. Stars rotate around the North Star and the southern celestial pole at 15 degrees per hour. There is a rotation of those stars that's measurable, okay? This isn't a guess. This is not an estimate. We can physically measure it, Now, we can also put a gyroscope on the surface of the Earth, just as I put my iPad here and measured the acceleration due to gravity, but we can put a gyroscope on the surface of the Earth and see whether or not that surface is rotating. Now, Bob from Globebusters did that, and there is a 15 degree per hour rotation on the surface of the Earth, which I might add precisely matches what we see in the heavens with the stars. So, if the stars were rotating and the Earth was still, the stars would rotate at 15 degrees an hour and the Earth would move. If the Earth was rotating and the stars were still, we would see a 15 degree per hour rotation on the Earth, which is what we in reality do. Now, if there was some combination, say, for example, we'd see 7.5 degrees per hour on star rotation, and then in the same direction, we'd see another 17.5 degree rotation on the surface of the Earth, that would account for the 15 degrees from both. Now, here is your kryptonite in the flat Earth model. okay? I want you to look up something called a gyrocompass. Now, a gyrocompass, which has been in common use since at least 1908, requires two things to work. One, it requires gravity. Because the way a gyrocompass differs from a standard gyroscope is the gyroscope can rotate in all three axes. Okay? A gyrocompass is restricted in one of those three axes. And the reason for that is that way there it will cause precession. And we'll talk about that in a second. But the way that they restrict the gyroscope in one axis is they put weights on it to hold it level to the Earth in response to gravity. Okay? Now, since the gyro can't tilt or rotate in that plane, it precesses in the other plane. Now, the other thing that is required for a gyroscope to work is a rotating Earth. Because when you put a gyroscope on a rotating body as a passenger, okay, what will happen is that gyroscope will precess so that the axis of its gyroscopic rotation, the little spindle that the gyroscope is actually rotating on, will precess to a line with the same axis as the rotation of the bigger body. And as a result, gyrocompasses indicate true north based on the rotational axis of the Earth. Okay? A gyrocompass requires gravity and it requires rotation to work. Gyrocompasses work. Therefore, we have rotation and gravity. Now, these have been in common use for almost 110 years, a little more than 110 years. They are not subject to your debate as to whether or not they are a thing. They are in use every day, okay? They're certified for use in navigation where lives depend on it. So, looking at them stupidly and saying, nuh-uh, physics doesn't care what your opinion of it is. Physics does not need your permission. Gyrocompasses work, and it doesn't care if you approve of it. It doesn't care as to whether or not it fits your narrative that you get super chats out of and income while you sit in your van using free Wi-Fi at a McDonald's somewhere, okay? They just work, so get over it.
But, moving along, let's play Globey here. If you're a globe believer and you go with that model, you prescribe to the idea of gravity as it's been taught, then you also believe that the Earth is orbiting around the sun as well as all the other planets. Now, there are 5 planets that are beyond the Earth that are still orbiting around the sun due to the idea of being within the sun's gravitational pull. Those planets are Mars, Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, and Neptune. Now, according to the globe model,
I grew up with Pluto too. I'm still a little bitter about that.
Jupiter is the largest planet in the solar system. It has a 272,967 miles circumference, and it's also large enough to hold 1,321 Earths inside it. Neptune is the planet that's farthest away from the sun in our solar system. It's said to be 2.793 billion miles away from the sun. Now, I would have to ask the question, if the largest planet in our solar system, Jupiter, is subjected to the gravitational pull of the sun, if the planet that is farthest away from the sun, Neptune, is subjected to the gravitational pull of the sun and caused to orbit around it, why is it that our moon, which is hilariously smaller than Jupiter and way closer to the sun than Neptune, why is our moon not orbiting around the sun? What we understand in the flat earth community, the sun and the moon are what moves here. They make a clockwise circuit around the center, which is known as the North Pole. I even took a trip to Alaska last summer so I could get.
Okay, I'm sorry, that's about enough of that silliness that I can deal with. Well, let's go see if we can figure this out, okay? Go with that. All right, so let's see. Force of gravity equals big G times mass 1, mass 2 over radius squared, right? Now, there's a couple of key features here. First of all, let's just say that's the mass of some body, and that's the mass of the thing that it's orbiting. Okay? So in our situation, we would have the mass of the sun out here, and this would be the Earth, right? Now, here is the key thing right here. The distance between the Earth and the sun is 94 million miles. Okay? That is going to really make that number small because it's, say, 94 million miles squared. However, if we instead say that this one right here is going to be the Earth, and that one's going to be the moon, what happens to our R down here? Right there. Now, let's go see if we can do something. That's 94 million versus 238,000 miles. I think that this one right here is probably going to have a lot more gravitational pull locally than that one will. So, we're the biggest boys in the block, and what's happening then is the moon itself is orbiting us. It's not orbiting. See, here's the Earth. There's our little blue marble. Here's our sun. This is 94 million miles. Here's our moon right there. That's a lot closer. And as a result, that bad boy is going to come here, and we're going to go there. Why is that so difficult for you to figure out, Marble? And then you go from that, which is something that's clearly observed, measured, predicted. You know, the other day I figured out how far away the moon was based on the fact that it just rotates around the Earth at a certain speed, and I know how fast the Earth would have to rotate for things to be weightless on the equator. So, this works. We can predict things with it. Your little flat Earth model over here, your pizza Earth, is just silliness. You know, you can punch holes in this all day long. You know, at night, my neighbor across the lake has got a porch light. That porch light is not bright enough to illuminate my backyard at night, but I sure can see it from all the way across the lake. So why can't I see the sun? Even though it's dark here, wouldn't I see the sun off in the distance somewhere? Have you ever thought this through, Marble?
Time lapse of the sun doing just that. The sun starts at this orange pole, moves off around the mountains, comes back around this little hill, comes back through the sky, and there it is back at the orange pole. So, if we have 5 planets that are much larger and much further away from the sun than our moon, why is it that the moon doesn't orbit around the sun? As always,
Because you couldn't think your way out of a paper bag without instructions? Now, first of all, let's go ahead and take the Earth right here. And what we're going to do is we're going to tilt it a little bit towards us. So as we rotate this around, you notice how we can always see the top of the Earth there? And that, my friend, is why the sun seems to move around the poles during certain times of the year. Okay? North Pole, it's going to be from, say, June to December, and South Pole from December to June. That has to do with the tilt of the Earth, and that's pretty much normal on a rotating Earth. Now, We already kind of addressed why the moon rotates around a large body that is nearby versus a massive body that is very distant to it. You know, it's just, it actually kind of amazes me that that confuses him in any way, shape, or form. It really does. And now, bury on. Moon is outside the Earth's Hill Sphere, IIRC. I'm sorry, I don't understand what that means. Do we have anything else up here? I don't think dmarble has given any thought to how high the sun is over the horizon at any time. You know how you can tell that? If dmarble honestly believed that the Earth, say, had a dome and the stars were embedded in that dome, and that dome rotated around the North Star, if you stood at the North Pole and looked south, what direction would the stars be moving? Wouldn't they simply be rotating parallel to the ground in a circle in time with the North Star? Okay. If you go down to the equator and basically go under what they call the celestial equator, basically what will happen is the stars will move in and form a parallel line at the equator, and then they will rotate around two opposing celestial poles. One is counterclockwise around the North Pole, and one is clockwise around the southern celestial pole. Now, I actually designed a flat Earth map the other day and used known observations. We got a storm coming in. We used known observations and created a shape that would have to represent. And the only way that I could make the stars work the way that we actually observe them is to have a clear sphere all the way around the Earth that rotated on a pole in line with the North and South Pole. And the only way that would work is if the top of the Earth was curved and the poles were going straight out from each other. In other words, the only way to design a flat Earth is to create a globe. So we got some fun stuff up here. So let's see what else we got in here. At Bob the Science Guy, it says here the sun has more pull on the moon than the Earth does. Okay, have you done the math? Why don't you go ahead and share it? Let's have a look. Now, if you don't have it ready and you haven't done the math, I will do the math a little bit later because I think that that's actually a very interesting question. I had the question the other day asked, why do we only see one face of the moon? And that resulted in a very nice episode that I believe is coming out next Tuesday on tidal locking of the moon and how it happens. Now, your question right there might make a very nice, might make a nice episode too. So if you don't do the math for that, trust me, I will, and we'll see what it looks like. Equal temp. Without a barrier, our atmosphere would flow into the vacuum of space. No, don't think so. You need to study the second law of thermodynamics a little bit better, and you need to actually look at the forces. Okay? All right, that looks pretty good. Let's go see if we got anything left on this. See if we have some more happiness here. Let's spread this around a little bit. Come on.
Good to each other. Take care of yourself. And stay flat. I'll see you next time. Thank you.
All right, that was dmarble there. Anybody have any requests that they would like to see? Is there another video that you might like to see and go over? If so, we'll go ahead and just stick it up there in the chat. Now, you know, guys, that video's got 3 million views, almost 3,500,000. Shoot, my whole channel's just coming up on 1 million views. But that's kind of a cool thing. Yeah, the harp guitar is really an amazing instrument because basically you have a combination of a melodic guitar with an acoustic bass. And generally, I would think that the bass strings are tuned to a chord, and he may actually. It looks like he's got a standard tuning on that guitar, but I don't know. This is just an amazing piece of music. He does a really nice version. He's got a really nice version of Unchained Melody, and there's a lot of them. So, does anybody have anything in particular that they would want to see? I'm thinking about maybe going over. Would you guys like to see the video? I know what. You guys want to see the video that's going to come out on Tuesday that I did today on the moon? Would you guys like a little preliminary on that one? A little sneak preview. Do you believe I misspelled YouTube? Let's go ahead on over here. Here. Well, hi everyone, and greetings from Northern Michigan. This is Bob the Science Guy, and today we have another episode of Northwood's Scientist. I'm going to see whether, hang on just a second, let's see if I can put this on the main screen. Well, hi everyone, and greetings from Northern Michigan. This is Bob the Science Guy, and today we have another... Okay, now this is one of my other series that I have. This is called Northwood Scientist, and what we do is we, on the 20th of March, I went out and measured the circumference of the Earth with a building square. This is one that I did on tidally locking the moon. So here you can have. This is going to come out on Tuesday, so you guys are welcome to watch this. I'd like to hear what you have to say about it. Another of my series is I've got a series on Project Gemini, and I have one on vaccinations. Guy, and today we have another episode of Northwood's Scientist. Today I'm going to respond to one of the comments on one of my videos, and that is, why is it that we only see one face of the moon all the time? We never see the backside of the moon. Now, why is it that the orbit of the moon, which is between 27 and 28 days, exactly coincides with the rotation period of the moon, resulting in us just seeing one face of the moon? Now that's a process called tidal locking, and let's see if we can solve this conundrum. So cue up the music and let's get going. Okay, so let's see if we can set this up a little bit. Now on my whiteboard, I have a blue arc up there that represents the Earth, and then I have a little gray circle that represents the moon. Now, those two green dots are what I'm going to call the center of gravity. Those are the points that gravity exerts its influence from. One is near the center of the Earth and the other is near the center of the moon. And the red line is the vector of force or the gravity between the Earth and the moon. Now, if you were to imagine that center of gravity in the moon, that green dot, was directly in the center of the mass of the moon could very easily rotate around that. Let me show you. Here is a yoke from a beach bonanza. Now, it's got a long tube on it, and that would represent the red line of gravitational attraction. And as you can see, the yoke itself can easily rotate on that line without stretching it at all. Let's go see what happens when we make a few real-life changes to this. Well, I'm sorry I got a little blue on you there. For some reason, the color just randomly changes on the video on this once in a while. So here we have basically our yo-yo moon. So we've got the center of gravity of the Earth up on the top in the green dot. Then we have the line of gravity connecting that to the center of gravity on the moon. And as a result of that, like a yo-yo, the moon can just rotate very happily. There's nothing wrong with that. But we have a little different situation in real life. And let me see if I can very carefully explain that so that it's a little easier to visualize. And here's the problem we run into. The moon is about 1.5 miles. It's a pretty good size object. Now, do you think that the gravity of the Earth affecting a point right here might be a little bit different than the gravity of the Earth affecting a point down here? Well, as it turns out, that's a far enough distance, and since the force of gravity is the inverse square of the distance, that actually makes a difference. So let's look at the moon a little different. So instead of having one big moon, let's take half of the mass of the moon, and we'll make a little moon out of it. And then right next to it, we'll make a second little moon that has the other half of the mass, and the center of gravity will be the same at both. Now, the center of gravity of this little, or the center of mass of this little moon is right there, and this little moon is right there. The Earth will pull stronger on that moon, or that part of the moon, than it will pull on that part of the moon, assuming that the Earth is in that direction. With me so far? So here's what the result of that will be. Two things. First of all, if you look at the center of mass of the moon, it may be right there, but the center of gravity of the moon might be right there. And instead of being completely round, the moon may actually be stretched a little bit into an oval shape like that. Now, if you were to look at the string that connects the center of the Earth to the center of the moon, the center of gravity that is, it's going to connect these two green dots, like so. So it's going to go to this dot right here, not that one. All right. Now, what happens when this, what's the result of this? Well, okay, so here's where things start getting interesting. Now, in this position right here of the moon, we're going to have the Earth down here, and the direction of gravity is going to go right from the center of gravity straight down to the center of the Earth. Notice that this is directly in line with the center of mass of the moon and of the oval shape of the moon. But what happens right there if we start rotating this? So now we're going to have something that looks like this. We're going to have the center of mass of the moon, and then we're going to have the center of gravity over here. Now, if the Earth is still down here, like so, it's going to pull in this direction towards the center of the Earth. Notice that there's a little bit of an angle here. You see this angle? Now, what happens with that? Now, first of all, the moon is rotating that way. But because the center of gravity is now off to the left there, it's going to try and pull back right underneath the center of mass, between the center of mass of the moon and the center of mass of the Earth. So what's going to happen is it's going to put a torque on the moon that way. So what will happen with this? Will that leave the rotation of the moon alone? Will it speed it up? Or, because this is an opposing torque, will it tend to slow the moon down? It'll slow the moon down. And eventually, what will happen is another thing that you may not think about. And that is this. If the moon is an oval like that, with a center of mass and a center of gravity, and that gravity is putting a torque on it, some of this gravity pulling it towards the Earth is going to be devoted to that direction because of that torque, which means that this one down here will decrease in strength. So what happens with that? Well, quite frankly, because there's less of a pull of gravity on the moon, and the moon is still going around the Earth, the moon is going to move away from the Earth. So two things will happen as a result of this. One, the rotation of the moon will slow down and eventually stop. And the second is that the moon will move further away from the Earth. Okay? So as a result, over billions of years, what has happened is that we have a moon, we have the center of mass of the moon, we have the center of gravity of the moon, and then down here to the Earth, it's being pulled directly towards the center of the Earth, and because of all this rotation, this anti-rotation torque here, it is eventually stopped. And as a result, as the Earth rotates, or as the moon orbits around the Earth, it will never rotate other than keeping this dot right here, the lower dot, between the center of mass of the moon and the center of gravity of Earth. It'll keep it lined up. And that's a situation that we call tidally locked. So the result is going to be, we got a moon out here with a center of mass, a center of gravity. Whoops, let's undo that one. That's a little off. We got a center of gravity of the moon. And if we draw a line like that, it will go straight to the center of gravity of the Earth. And as it moves around, say over to here, we're still going to have a center of mass of the moon. The center of gravity of the moon will rotate a little bit to keep it in line with the center of the Earth. And as a result, we will always see the same side of the moon. Now let's take this and use and just follow this up with the Earth. Now, the same thing happens with the Earth. So we've got the moon out here, and it's tidally locked above the surface of the Earth. The Earth is actually a little oval as well because of the gravitational attraction between the center of mass of the, or the center of gravity of the Earth and the center of gravity of the moon. It does exactly the same thing. It pulls that center of gravity a little away from the center of mass. And as a result, it also deforms the Earth to be a little bit oval. So, as the Earth rotates, like so, it will move that center of gravity off to the side. And for the exact same reason that the moon slows down, there will be a counter torque in there, and that will slow the Earth down. So eventually, as time goes on, there is going to be one face of the moon that we see, that face, and there will only be one face of the Earth that will face it. This side of the Earth over here will never see the moon because the Earth will no longer be rotating. Now, the reason that this happened to the moon before it happened to the Earth is that the moon is a much smaller body than the Earth is. The Earth is 8,000 miles in diameter. The moon is a quarter of that size. Correspondingly, there's a lot more mass in the Earth than there is in the moon. So the Earth will affect the moon long before the little bit of backward tug on the rotation of the Earth from the moon affects the Earth. There you go. Now, the last thing that I would like to talk about is, can you see these effects on the Earth itself? Yes, you can. Let me show you how. So, we've got the Earth that is sitting right here. And it is surrounded by water. Now, if the moon is out here, it is going to pull on the Earth in basically this direction due to the gravitational attraction of the moon. What will that do? That will cause the water on this side of the moon to bulge out a little bit. And to balance it, there will be another bulge on the other side, like this. And the water on these ends will actually pull in a little bit because some of that water is being pulled out. See? Now, these are the tides. This is how high tide works. Now, there's a tide on one side of the Earth here, and there's a tide on the other side of the Earth over here. That's half a rotation around. Since the Earth rotates once every 24 hours, we get a high tide every 12 hours. And on the 6 hours in between those, we get a low tide. So, that is why they talk about this tidal locking, because it has to do with, it's seen by the tides on the Earth. But as I've shown you, there's a very clear explanation as to why the Earth is tidally locking the moon in orbit. And as a result, the same face of the moon is shown to the Earth all the way around the 27.3-day orbit, because it no longer can rotate, because it takes energy for it to rotate against the pull of gravity of the Earth. And as a result, it'll settle in to the lowest energy state there is, and that is with the center of mass of the moon directly over the center of gravity of the moon, and that is on a direct line to the center of gravity of the Earth. And any effort to move away from that either way requires energy to pull it it results in a backward torque trying to pull it back to that low state. It's kind of like this pen. You know, it can go back and forth like this, but that is its balance point. If I move it up like that, it'll try and pull back to that point. If I move it over like this, it'll try and pull back to that point. This is the same thing that happened with the moon. And eventually what happened is it settled in on that orientation. Okay, so let's just make one final statement here. Now, the moon out here actually does rotate, okay? As we recall, it goes around the Earth about every 27.3 days in a nice orbital rotation like this. And then comes back like that. Now, the moon itself rotates every 27.3 days as well. And the net result is the same face of the moon is always facing the Earth. So it's going to actually kind of rotate around like this. And you see this little rubber thing right here. The same side of that rubber thing is always pointing towards my fingers. It's in the same orientation. And the same thing happens with the moon. So as a result, it's kind of like holding your fist out and watching it go like this. Your wrist is always between you and your knuckles. And that's the face of the moon that we always see. And then the far side of the moon is always facing away from us. So hopefully that made things nice and clear for you. This is Bob the Science Guy signing out from Northern Michigan. Thank you for taking a few minutes with me today and learning a little bit about the moon. I hope I was able to help you some. So remember to like and subscribe to my channel, and we'll keep these videos coming. Take care, guys. Well, hi everyone, and greetings from Northern Michigan. This is Bob the Science Guy. Well, alrighty guys, anybody have anything else that you want to cover? Let's see, did we mention a guy by the name of Nathan Oakley yet? Anybody ever hear of a guy named Nathan Oakley? Yeah, I was thinking about him the other day. What's this? Let's get that silliness down. Yeah, I think I made a video on him today. Why don't you guys go ahead and check out my video from today. I was going into work in Cadillac the other day, and I happened to call into his show because I really wanted to learn more about this critical angle and Rayleigh criterion. And I thought maybe Nathan could help me out a little bit. So, anybody have anything else that they want to go over tonight, or you want to go ahead and give this chat an end? I think what I'm going to do is probably make this unlisted, and I'll put it up again, or I'll download it and release it as a new video for Sunday, probably around 3 o'clock. Just do a replay of this chat. If you guys like these things, I'm in my office in Mount Pleasant every Thursday, and I get done generally by 5 o'clock or so, and it's pretty convenient for me to go ahead and do a couple-hour live stream on Thursday evenings at about 5 o'clock until about 7 or maybe even 8 o'clock. And if you would like to do that, we'll go ahead and make this a regular feature of the channel. And I think this is a really great time for folks to go ahead and ask questions, or maybe we'll do some hangouts in the future and do some live interaction. And you know, it'd be kind of fun to just kind of go over somebody's movie and see whether or not you know, we'll go over one of the videos from the Flat Earth, and we'll kind of take it apart a little bit like we did with what was his name, D-Marble today, because some of them are actually comedic gold. And I really enjoy doing it. So Unless anybody has anything that really they really want to hit tonight. Let me have a look at the chat here one more time. No, my nickname is not Dr. Machine Gun. Now, just so you know, I was in the Army when I was young, and I was a combat medic. I was also a civilian paramedic at the time, too. So my job was not really to blow stuff up. My job was basically to be infantry with extra crap to carry. And I kind of enjoyed it. I had a great time in the military. I was never deployed overseas. I started off enlisted, worked my way up to E4, which, you know, kind of was nirvana in the Army. If you're a Spec 4 medic in the Army, you basically have the world by the short hairs. And then I kind of made a mistake. When anything really bad happened, they came and got me, and we had one of the physicians who was a full bird colonel foobarred his ankle a little bit. And I went and took care of that. And he was a physician, as I said, so he kind of knew what he was doing. And he saw what I was doing. And when he got done, he says, "That feels pretty good. You did a nice job with it. You're in college, aren't you?" Next thing I know, I've got a letter to the ROTC commander at Michigan State University, and the long and short of it is I ended up getting commissioned. And then my life was basically over as a second lieutenant. Nobody liked me anymore, so that kind of sucked. Right now, I volunteer in the service. I'm a search and rescue pilot, and I'm still kind of serving my community in that way, but basically I'm a scoutmaster in a uniform with a rank. So I never was a real, you know, I wasn't one of these gung-ho military guys, but I do enjoy serving my country, and I was glad that I had a chance to do it. So let's go see what else we have. All right, somebody keeps wanting to talk about Jake the Asshole. I'm going to have a look for that. Somebody put a link to his channel up there, because I don't think doing a YouTube search for Jake the Asshole is going to work real well. All right, I sent you an email on that. My brains don't work out on the math. I'll go have a look at it, and if you sent me an email, I'll go ahead and respond to you there. Jupiter doesn't orbit the sun, rather than the sun and Jupiter orbiting around a central gravitational point. Now that's true. Basically, the same thing happens, you know, as we were talking about with the Earth and the Moon. The center of gravity is not the center of mass on the Moon. The center of gravity is basically where you would tie the string that holds it in orbit. Now, likewise, the center of gravity and the center of mass of the Earth is not the same place. It's moved a little bit towards the Moon. The center of gravity in the Sun is not the center of mass of the Sun. It's very close because the Sun is so massive, but it's also got these planets out around it that kind of add their own little vector to it, and so it moves around a little bit. Oh, angle of attack babies. No, don't have anything with that. Woo-woo needs faith. Yes, center of gravity and center of mass are different. You know, the center of the object I would call would be the center of mass, and the center of gravity is where the gravitational forces apply. They can be a little bit different, and as have been alluded to, they tend to orbit. If you were to look at the Earth and the Moon, they would orbit in a double orbit around a point somewhere in between them, you know, in between the center of the mass. Machine gun. Machine gun isn't a play on Michigan. No, it's not a play on Michigan. What do we got out here? Ah, Isaacs, Dutch Machine Corps, or Dutch Marine Corps. Excellent. Harry Warp, I'm not allowed to answer that question, but I would say that you are really, really warm, because I don't want to involve that in this. Yeah, I got demoted to second lieutenant. That's the truth of it, man. Yeah, and like I said, machine gun's not a play on Michigan. It was actually machine gun. So, Jake the Asshole, that is his real name, and he is a correctly named conspiracy chaser? I'm going to have a look. Oh, come on, it keeps jumping. Yeah, they're talking about Berry centers here. That's what I'm talking about. That's the point that, two objects orbit about. Nathan Oakley is the best out there. Nobody succeeds in debunking his angle of attack. Bob tried to explain the angle and made a great effort. No. Nathan Oakley is an idiot. I'm sorry. He is scientifically illiterate. His angle of attack nonsense is completely irrational. So here, since you brought that up, let me go ahead and just mention a couple things here. Yeah, super chat so my wife lets me do these things. I end up giving her all the money anyhow, so make her happy. If she's happy, I'll be happy, okay? Now, when we have an eye out here, okay, we've got an eye, and we're going to look at an object here, okay? Our eye will form an angle from the bottom of the object to the top of the object, and that's an angle, okay? This would be the ground, say. Now, this angle right here that is formed by our field of view between the top of the object and the bottom of the object allows us to tell the top of the object from the bottom of the object. The Rayleigh criterion says that when this angle becomes too small, we can't tell that from that. And as a result, it becomes a single point, and whether or not we see it depends on how bright it is. All right? Now, what Oakley seems to think is that this angle right here is important. It's not. Okay? Because they're desperately trying to come up with something that would fit the flat Earth narrative that objects disappear from the bottom due to reasons. All right, and this is the reason that they're trying to do. Now, another bit of silliness that you will see out of flat Earth once in a while is, say you have an object in the distance and you can see everything above that line but not below it. They seem to think that there is a separate angle that finds this spot magically, and that angle's too small to see, but we can see that angle just fine. Again, that's silliness. All right, it's the whole angle. And the Rayleigh criteria only affects whether or not you can tell two objects apart. So let's go ahead and just do a little exercise here. Now, I actually asked Nathan outright, Nathan Oakley, do you know what the critical angle for the human eye is, the unaided human eye, to make objects disappear? His answer was no, because he doesn't. Now, this is the difference between science and a cult, okay? If I don't know something in science, I will go try to find out about it, okay? If I'm going to talk about the Rayleigh criteria, I'm going to learn how to use it. I'm going to maybe do a couple of calculations. If you're in a cult that has a narrative, like Nathan Oakley is, what he's going to do is he's going to come up, somebody's going to tell him something about this thing called the Rayleigh criterion, and it makes objects disappear. And then he's going to start talking about it in the curve calculator. You know, why is it not in the curve calculator? Well, why should it be in the curve calculator? Why don't you tell me what the angle is? I don't know. All right. Why do you think it should be in it? Well, it's not, so therefore it's wrong. Well, no. Let's go ahead and look at an example of the Rayleigh criterion. Say we have a building out here that is 100 meters tall. Now, we have some distance between us and that building. Now, in order for us to be able to tell the difference between the bottom of that building and the top of that building, that's going to form an angle. Now, the critical angle for the human eye with the Rayleigh criterion is 0.007 degrees. That's also 25 arc seconds. It's less than a minute of angle. Okay? In order to get a triangle where that angle right there is 0.007, how far away do you think that 100-meter building has to be? Needs to be 118.5 kilometers away to get an angle of 0.007 degrees on an object that is 100 meters from top to bottom. Now, the curve calculator very clearly states that this object will disappear due to Earth curve in 40 kilometers. So, Nathan Oakley, I'll put this out right now. I know that you don't have much of a channel. You know, you have more subscribers than I do. But quite frankly, your monthly subs, your monthly view, etc. are only a fraction of mine. And I've only been doing this for 4 months. And you've been doing it for how many years? All right. So even though your channel is really nothing compared to mine, because I've got decent content on mine and you've got dribble and arguments on yours, I'll bet you channels. I want you to show me a photograph of a 100-meter tall building, shore to shore, sea level to sea level, at 200 kilometers. If you can show me that, I'll close my channel. If you can't, I want you to close yours, all of them. Now, personally, I don't think you have the stones to do it, because I think you know that the Earth is a globe. But I'm going to give you a chance. I gave you a chance to come here. I didn't have to do that show that on you this morning that I did. I gave you the opportunity Monday when I called in to defend your position. You refused to. Your only defense was to shout over me. Well, you asked me a stupid question at the time. And that was, do you, Bob the Science Guy, think that you're more learned than I am? Well, the answer is yes. But it's not me telling you that. It's the people listening. Already know that. All right? So, if you have the stones, 100 meters, 200 kilometers, sea level to sea level. And this is for pink slips on our channel, boy. If not, you just continue with what you're doing. And I'll continue to stop by and make some videos on you, because you're great content for my channel. So let's go see what else we have up here. Daniel Hubbs, I'd like you to address whether or not Jupiter is orbiting the Sun or the Sun's orbiting Jupiter. Jupiter is orbiting the Sun at a point that is between Jupiter and the center of the Sun. Okay? Let's see what else we got here. Yeah, Nathan, how do you convert meters to kilometers? Because that's not really 818 meters. It's actually 818,511 meters. So how many kilometers would that be, Chief? Why don't you ask Riley? While you're at it, ask him how a triangle, 818 kilometers by 818 kilometers by 818 kilometers. Ask him what the internal angles would be. Yeah, okay, yeah, this is a common problem in flat Earth. Just because the number's big doesn't mean it's wrong. All right, I'm sorry that you can't wrap your head around something, but that doesn't make it wrong. It just makes you dumb. But you can get educated. And maybe have a look at a couple of my videos. Maybe some of them might educate you a little bit. That's what they're there for. I'm not here to call you stupid. I'm here to try and promote science, technology, engineering, and math education. I'm not a math wizard. I'm high school at best. All right, that's not what I do. I'm not an engineer. I'm not a physicist. I have high school and early college physics. I mean, nothing special here. But I have a love of learning, and when I don't understand something, I try and learn a little bit about it. That's the thing that I really love about dealing with flat Earth videos. My story is very similar to Wolfie's. Being a pilot, I saw a couple of videos out there that started talking about some nonsense about planes having to dip their nose in order to fly around the curve of the Earth. Well, that's not really the way planes fly, and I figured, well, maybe I'll just put out a video and tell them how it actually works. And then the fight began. And then I said, okay, game on, bucko. I'll step up to the bat. And I did, and my channel has really grown amazingly. I do appreciate everything. You guys all like and subscribe right now. It'll make my wife happy. All right. She gets everything from this channel anyhow. So let's make her happy, because if she's happy, I'm going to be a little happier. So all right, Colin, I will hop on Discord later. But so basically I started these things to try and promote some obvious errors. You got, what's his name, P-Brain, that seems to think that all the oceans would spin off of the Earth if it was rotating, and then I just showed him the math for it, and it was really quite obvious. And then, obviously he did the right thing. He said, "Look, man, I was wrong. I see where I made my mistake, and I see what's going on here now, and I understand, and I want to thank you very much for enlightening me on that. I feel smarter now." No, he just doubled down on the stupid. That's a common problem that we run into. Let's go see what else we got up here in the chat, because I'm probably gonna close this out pretty soon. It's actually been a lot of fun. I enjoy it. I think it's going to be a lot better when I have a hangout going too. I sent out a note to some of my fellow NASA shills and invited them to the hangout, but quite frankly, none of them showed up. I think they all hate me. I don't know why. I'm a nice guy. Okay, what do we got? Okay, so Robert Thomas. So why do flat earthers think that there's an absolute distance, whereas anything of any size can be seen? Well, there actually is an absolute distance from what we can see, because it just gets beyond our limit of detection. We can only detect so much. So there is a limit to how far we can see. It's thousands of light years away with equipment. But probably the easiest way to describe that is to tell you why they don't believe in space. Okay? Now, despite the fact we've been going to space since longer than I've been around, our first rockets up into space that captured a picture of the curve of the Earth, and that's a key phrase, a curve of the Earth, went up in 1946. They sent some captured German V2s up with 35mm camera, and they took pictures of the freaking curvature of the Earth. If space exists, they have to admit the fact that there are satellites, that we have gone to space. The ISS, which we can photograph like clockwork, is up there with people on it. People that have cameras. People with cameras that can take a picture of the shape of the Earth. So if space exists, flat Earth goes away, because we have photos from space. That's why every single photo of space has to be CGI. Now, the next thing that they have to deny, because it would destroy their entire concept, is gravity. Because gravity will not allow a disk 8,000 miles in diameter to exist. It will collapse it into a sphere. and it would have done it long, long ago. Now, by denying gravity, they have to, that's to protect their narrative. So there is no way that they can do it. All right. Then they have to deny science, because science, with its measurements and its math, confirms the Earth is a sphere. So what they do is they come up with this silly ass independent dependent variable definition. Now, if you actually look at the definition of what an independent variable is, let's go ahead and put one up. Let's go see. Yeah, give me a second here. Let's go on over here. I probably should have brought this up earlier. I'm very sorry. Okay, right here, the very first one that you see. A variable, often denoted by x, whose variation does not depend on that of another. Okay. Now, let's look at this. Here is an independent variable is the variable that is changed or controlled in a scientific experiment to test the effects on the dependent variable. Now, what are we missing here? We're missing the key definition from flat Earth, and that is who varies the dependent or the independent variable. Do you see anything here that says the investigator must personally vary the independent variable? No, you don't. Why did they add that the investigator has to do the varying? Because then that excludes seismology, which says the Earth is spherical and has a core. It excludes astronomy. It excludes theoretical physics, so that they can sit down and deny it. Now, another key example of this is Anthony Riley and his, Einstein broke the wand of Newton. Okay, take a drink. Now, what does that even mean? What is Newton's wand? Newton's wand was the unknown, seemingly magical association between one mass and another that caused the masses to come together, because he couldn't describe what actually caused that. Now, when Einstein came out with his theory of relativity, he gave a reason for that gravity to actually work and actually had a speed for it. It traveled at the speed of light. Now, that's all that means. Does that mean that Newton's laws of motion don't apply anymore? No. Does it mean that Newton's universal law of gravity doesn't apply anymore? No. Okay, it works just fine. Okay? It's another way of looking at the same thing. You see, that's the difference between a scientific law, which describes what is occurring. So, universal law of gravity, we have a downward acceleration of 9.81 meters per second squared. That is the law. All right? We can use that to calculate things. It makes no presumption of what's causing it. It just says, there it is. This is what's happening. Okay? A scientific theory says, and it's happening because of this. This is the why it's happening. And an example would be the universal law of gravity, which describes how objects operate under the force of gravity. And Einstein's theory of relativity, which describes what causes that effect. And, what's the basis of gravity? And that's the effect of mass on space-time. Okay, they're two different things. Now, right here with the independent and dependent variable, if you think about an experiment, and this is what Riley and the others and Quantum Eraser and such don't comprehend, and that is they want to put the investigator in with the independent variable. All right? Things can vary naturally. Now, a little thought exercise for you real quick. Now, say, let's see who's out here. RapidX. Say RapidX and I are doing an experiment. I am the lead investigator on that, and RapidX is my associate or my student, for example. Now, if we're conducting an experiment that has an independent variable, if I vary the independent variable, that would follow Anthony Riley's definition of an independent variable because I personally manipulated that variable. But what if I ask Rapid to do it? Does it matter whether his name's first or my name's first? Is it okay for somebody who's listed second to vary the independent variable even though he's not the primary investigator? Okay. What if we're trying to measure the speed of sound and we have my son 15 miles away sound an air horn? Okay. So he's varying the independent variable. He's not on the experiment, but he's an assistant. Can an assistant do that? Now the question becomes, is the important thing who varies the independent variable? Or is the important thing the fact that the independent variable is varied? My money's on the latter. How about you guys? So this is just typical nonsense that Flat Earth does. They try and come up with these rules and these definitions that they cherry picked, which many times, like the Rayleigh criteria or breaking the wand of Newton, they're being used by people that have no idea what they're even talking about. And they just don't understand what they're even saying. So how on earth can they possibly use that word in a sentence? If you don't know the definition of a word, how can you use it in a sentence? I mean, it just doesn't work that way. So let's go see what else we got out here. We got anything else? No, that looks like about it. Yeah, I don't see anything else out here. We've been doing this about 2.5 hours. I think that that's a really good time to go ahead and just kind of drop the stream here. I did have a request from Irish Stew to play the Stew's Blues. So what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and finish out on that. Let me go ahead and hit this. I've never listened to this song. Hopefully it's kind of a cool song. But let's all enjoy Irish Stew. Apparently he did this himself. Now, many of you know my theme song. You know, obviously that's based on Bob Dylan's Knocking on Heaven's Door. And it was played by Jamie Dupree, who is actually a fan of this channel and personally gave me permission to use his musical catalog. Now, the person that came up with the lyrics and did all the vocals is a small creator by the name of Canadian Thomas. And I would suggest that you go ahead and check out his channel. You know, another channel that you should check out is what's called BlueMarbleScience, all one word. He's a really great guy, kind of sounds like Sam Elliott. He's an engineer down in Tennessee, and he and I did the Eratosthenes shadow experiment at the equinox, and not only proved the radius and the circumference of the Earth, we also showed that it was not flat. So there you go, man. So let's go ahead and let you have this music, and then I'm going to get on out of here and see whether or not this works. I'm thinking that'll come on up. Yep, there you go. Well, guys, I'm going to sign out. You go ahead and enjoy, guys.